buckle up, because we're about to dive deep, and I mean deep, into the story of a civilization that literally set the standard for the world, ancient Egypt. Trust me, this country's history is an absolute goldmine. Think colossal monuments, mysterious rituals, and a timeline so long it makes almost everything else look like a flash in the pan. We're talking about a story that stretches back over 5,000 years and lasted for 3 millennia. So, are you ready to uncover some secrets? Let's go. Picture this. It's long before 3100 BCE, and the most important river in the world, the River Nile, is carving its way through a vast desert. Now, in that hot, dry landscape, the Nile was everything. It was the ultimate source of life, allowing people to build little villages in northeast Africa and grow crucial crops like wheat, barley, and even flax for clothes. And, get this, papyrus for paper. This early era is what historians call the pre-dynastic period. Initially, Egypt was kind of split up into two, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt. But even then, these folks were inventing things left and right. They developed the earliest forms of their iconic two-dimensional art, started using a sophisticated grid system to make sure all their figures had perfect proportions, and even created the first form of their writing, hieroglyphs. But fast forward to around 3100 BCE, and things get seriously dramatic. The first pharaoh, Menes, did the seemingly impossible. He unified Upper and Lower Egypt. And just like that, the early dynastic period was born, with Memphis as the first capital. This strong central government became the engine for art and innovation, encouraging scribes, sculptors, and artisans. Also, they established conventions for three-dimensional art, deciding how a king should be represented, which was always symbolised by his sheer size in the artwork. But of course, the true highlight comes during the Old Kingdom. This, my friends, is the original Golden Age, the time when they built those colossal monuments that still amaze us today. And it all started with the Step Pyramid for King Djoser. Then it got increasingly wild during the Fourth Dynasty. We're talking about the time the Great Sphinx and the Great Pyramids of Giza were constructed. I mean, the Great Pyramid of Giza alone stood at a whopping 481 feet, or 147 metres, and was made of 2.3 million stone blocks. For 3,800 years, it was the tallest human-made structure in the world. Imagine the engineering, the planning, the sheer will required. They believed so deeply in the afterlife that they spent their entire lives planning for it, building these giant tombs and filling them with all their favourite stuff. Sadly, all good things eventually hit a snag, because around the 6th dynasty, the central government started to collapse, leading to a period of instability. That instability, called the First Intermediate Period, saw Egypt split in two again, ruled by Memphis in the north and Thebes in the south. Civil war and disorder reigned for about 150 years. But Egypt has a history of bouncing back, doesn't it? That's why the Middle Kingdom brought the reunion, thanks to Mentuhotep. It was a true rebirth. A new god, Amun-Ra, rose to prominence, and Thebes became a huge centre of religious cult. Artistically, they were pushing boundaries too. Bronze casting flourished, women started appearing in individual portraits, and even people lower on the social ladder began commissioning statues. Then, a temporary dip again occurred during the Second Intermediate Period, when foreign rulers, called the Hyksos, seized power in the north. But hold on to your hats, because here comes the New Kingdom, which took place between 1550 to 1069 BCE. It was a time of political stability, economic prosperity, and an explosion of artistic genius. Not only that, but this was also the era of some of the biggest names you know, like Hatshepsut, the first historically confirmed female pharaoh; Akhenaten, the revolutionary pharaoh who tried to introduce the worship of a single god and created a completely new, fluid style of art called the Amarna style; Tutankhamun, the boy king whose nearly intact tomb gave us the most incredible peek into New Kingdom wealth; and Rameses II, often called Rameses the Great, known for his massive building projects and military campaigns. Now the story starts to wind down through the Third Intermediate Period and the Late Period, from 1069 to 332 BCE, with Egypt falling under the rule of others, like the Nubians and Libyans. Then, in 332 BCE, a new chapter begins when Alexander the Great conquers Egypt. After his death, his general Ptolemy founded a new dynasty, leading to the Ptolemaic period. This is the era of colossal statues and, of course, the legend herself, Cleopatra. Her death in 30 BCE signalled the end of independent ancient Egypt, as it became a Roman province. And even in the Roman period, history keeps turning, with the adoption of Christianity becoming the official religion, and art reflecting both pagan and Christian themes. Now, if you thought the history was mind-blowing in and of itself, wait until we talk about the geography of Egypt. Seriously, the land is the co-star of this whole epic story. Alright, so you know how some countries just have a river? Well, Egypt is the river. You can't separate the civilization from its geography. Egypt sits right in the northeastern corner of Africa, making it a key player in global history, sharing borders with the Gaza Strip, Israel, Libya, and Sudan. But fun fact, the Sinai Peninsula is actually the only part of Egypt that's on the Asian continent. So, when you visit, you're not just in Africa, you're standing on a bridge between two massive landmasses. Now, in terms of sheer scale, Egypt is enormous, covering about 390,000 square miles, or about 1,002,000 square kilometres. And for the most part, the land is a vast desert plateau, a sweeping expanse of sand with one massive, glorious, life-changing exception, the Nile River Valley. Because let's be honest, you can't talk about Egypt without talking about the absolute superstar, the Nile. This is the eternal lifeline of Egypt, and it has shaped everything, from the culture to the civilization to the people for millennia. So the Nile begins far down south, formed by the merger of the White Nile and the Blue Nile near Khartoum in Sudan, and it then flows a massive distance north toward the Mediterranean Sea. As it traverses the country, the Nile carves out two distinct, incredibly fertile regions that the ancient Egyptians recognized as their two lands, which I briefly mentioned earlier. First, you have Upper Egypt in the south. I know it's pretty confusing, but it's upper because it's upstream, where the river's elevation is higher. This is the Nile Valley, a narrow, vibrant ribbon of life, flanked dramatically by unforgiving desert. Then, as the river nears the Mediterranean, it spreads out and divides, forming the expansive, triangular Nile Delta, which is Lower Egypt in the north. The genius of the Nile was its seasonal flooding, which deposited a rich, fertile layer of sediment, or silt, and gave the land its ability to produce crops. And the Egyptians understood this completely. That's why they called the life-giving riverbanks the Black Land, or Kemet. In sharp contrast to that fertile strip is the Red Land, or Deshret, which is the vast, formidable desert that makes up more than 90% of Egypt. This desert was no joke, and it played a crucial role as a colossal, natural fortress, protecting the civilization from invaders on two sides. The desert is generally split into two major parts by the Nile: the enormous Western Desert, which is part of the infamous Sahara, and the smaller, more mountainous Eastern Desert. The Western Desert is truly massive, home to the country's lowest point, the Qattara Depression, but it also holds the surreal, alien-looking White Desert with its bizarre chalk rock formations, and the immense Great Sand Sea where dunes stretch out farther than you can imagine. But the deserts hold secrets too, because tucked away in the Western Desert are the legendary oases. Lush pockets of greenery like Siwa, Baharia, and Farafra are popping up in the middle of all that sand. These were vital rest and water stops for travellers, offering springs, palm groves, and a beautiful, life-affirming contrast to the arid surroundings. Baharia, for instance, is still famous for its hot springs and acts as a major launch pad for desert safaris today. Besides this, we can't forget that Egypt also has some stunning coastlines. Up north, the Mediterranean coast is where you find the great ancient city of Alexandria, a region that was always critical for trade and international contact, making the delta a truly multicultural melting pot throughout history. Then you have the gorgeous Red Sea coast, and this is a must-see. This area, especially around places like Hurghada, is a paradise for divers, famous for its gin-clear waters and unbelievably vibrant coral reefs. So when you think about it, Egypt's geography is a perfect masterpiece of balance: the life-giving Nile, the protective Red Land, and the strategic positioning between Africa and Asia, all wrapped up in one incredible package. It's the ultimate example of how the environment shapes destiny. Now let me ask you this. What happens when a country with the Nile's lifeline and the world's most critical shortcut, also known as the Suez Canal, hits an economic wall? Well, let me tell you. After getting hit by the shockwaves of COVID-19 and the war in Ukraine, this country has been deemed, essentially, too big to fail. Think about it. Egypt has over 118 million people. It controls the critical Suez Canal, and it holds the only Arab border with Gaza. It's Africa's second largest economy, and those geopolitical cards have just triggered one of the biggest bailout and investment rushes we've seen recently. So the immediate result? A huge influx of foreign cash. The total external support has topped $50 billion. The United Arab Emirates, or UAE, led the charge with a massive $35 billion investment, including existing deposits for a huge tourism complex called Ras El Hekma on the Mediterranean coast. That is the biggest foreign direct investment, or FDI, on record. And right after that, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, stepped in with $8 billion. The European Union matched that with another $8 billion, and the World Bank chipped in $6 billion. That's a lot of zeros, folks. But of course, this cash injection came with a massive change. Structural reform. The biggest move was when the Central Bank of Egypt floated the Egyptian pound last year. This basically meant letting the currency's value be determined by the market. So, why do that? Simple. To stabilise the currency and kill the black market exchange. The result was an immediate sharp drop, with the pound depreciating by almost 40%. That kind of currency shock is tough. For a while, inflation remained painfully high, hitting 33% in 2023, though it eased a bit to 28% in 2024, and it's expected to drop below 20% this year. But social entrepreneurs are cautiously optimistic, arguing that while inflation is high in the short term, this move builds investor trust in the mid to long term. But the bet seems to be paying off, at least in terms of attracting money. Thanks largely to the Ras El Hekma deal, Egypt was the 9th largest recipient of FDI globally last year, according to UN data. Now they're trying to attract another $42 billion this 2025. Because of this, economists are starting to see the light at the tunnel, with growth forecast to accelerate to 4% in 2025, up from 2.4% in 2024, and key sectors like tourism and manufacturing already expanding. Even credit rating agencies like Moody's and S&P Global are confirming Egypt's outlook with a stable or positive rating. But let's get to the nitty-gritty here. How big is the economy actually? While official data reports Egypt's GDP was around $407 billion in current prices for 2024, many experts argue that the figure is way too low. Why? Because official estimates often miss a huge, hidden factor, the massive informal economy, which accounts for nearly 29% of economic activity. When you adjust for that, estimates suggest Egypt's 2025 GDP could actually be a whopping $3.04 trillion in purchasing power terms. So, where is this money going? It's fueling huge ambitions. We're talking massive flagship projects like the $59 billion New Cairo development and the $9 billion Suez Canal expansion. Plus, a major privatization program is underway to list state-owned companies and generate capital. This entire push is heavily backed by Gulf money. Beyond the UAE's investment, Saudi Arabia has pledged $15 billion, Qatar has announced $7.5 billion, and even the startup scene is buzzing, with Egyptian startups leading Africa in activity last year. Now, it wouldn't be fair if I didn't tell you the whole story, and the rebound is real but far from complete. Egypt is still heavily reliant on external lifelines. Government revenues are dangerously dependent on three main sources: remittances, tourism, and Suez Canal revenues. The Suez Canal, which was once a $10.3 billion cash machine annually, saw its income plunge by about 60% last year to just $4 billion due to the Red Sea tensions. That's a huge dent. On top of that, government debt hovers near 90% of GDP, and while they're building new cities, a massive 1/3 of Egyptians live below the poverty line, and 800,000 new job seekers enter the market every year. So, while the country is on a promising path, experts agree that sustaining the reform momentum is absolutely critical. And you want to know where all of these, the history, geography, and economy, collide? It's in the culture. So, the heart of modern Egypt is its deep faith and incredible hospitality. The official religion is Islam, with the majority being Sunni Muslims. But Egypt is a proud mosaic. The largest religious minority is the Coptic Christian community, which traces its roots back to the earliest days of Christianity. But beyond faith, the bedrock of life here is family and hospitality, where treating strangers with warmth, often with an offering of sweet tea or coffee, is a tradition as old as the pyramids themselves. And speaking of tea or coffee, we've got to pivot now to the food scene. And Egyptian cuisine is hearty, satisfying, and full of flavour. You absolutely must try the national dish kashari, which is a glorious savoury pile of rice, lentils, pasta, and chickpeas, all topped with crispy fried onions and tomato sauce. You'll also find classics like tamaya or Egyptian falafel, made with fava beans. And to wash it down? The country runs on sweet tea and coffee, but the true flagship beverage is karkade, a stunning deep red herbal tea made from hibiscus flowers, which is equally great hot or chilled. When you hit the market or souk, get ready to dance, because haggling isn't just about the price, it's a time-honoured social exchange, and merchants genuinely love the witty banter. You'll find beautiful brassware, spices, and carpets, and a good negotiation will score you a souvenir and a fantastic memory. While you're at it, check out the clothes. Fashion here tells the story of the land, from the traditional robes influenced by the Pharaohs to the richly embroidered garments of the Bedouin and Nubian communities. But now that we've journeyed through 5,000 years of history, seen the power of the Nile, and understood the stakes of the multi-billion-dollar economy, what would you say is the most iconic thing that Egypt has contributed to the world stage? I'm curious to know your thoughts, so drop them down in the comments. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, you'll love this next one.